I've always been amazed at how composers influence each other, because sometimes I think it's easy to get this idea that these were isolated geniuses who were not in touch with their colleagues or the rest of the musical world, and it's of course far from the truth. And so I started to experiment with this, to actually have some sort of a story of influence over a program, with composers' legacies being very clear. This program is probably an unusual combination. I decided to try and find ways and find pieces that connect to each other, not necessarily in a directly obvious way. I've experimented with these pieces in different settings, and I've also just recorded a CD called Legacy, where I focus on William Byrd and Schoenberg as two comparable musical minds, really, and they also had very comparable lives, because they both had this sort of cult following of students around them that was, and they're remembered for that, and that activity was almost, the activity of teaching and influencing the next generation was almost as important as their actual music. I think the idea of pioneering something or starting again with Schoenberg is very important with the Opus 11 pieces, because it's the earliest piano work where he moves away from tonality. Up until then, his piano music and most of his music had been sort of in the style of Brahms, very tonal. And then, of course, there's Schoenberg as a teacher to Skalkottas. Skalkottas is a composer who features in the Boulez Saal this year. And I have two works by Skalkottas in this program. One that was written the year that he starts to work with Schoenberg, and then that's 1927, and then the other, Passacaglia, which is also a neoclassical work, because Passacaglia is an older Renaissance form. It's not strictly speaking 12-tone, because at that point Skalkottas was looking back. He was in Greece. This was written in 1940, so he had gone back to Greece, and he was looking back at nostalgia at the Berlin years. So he in fact uses only 11 notes for the dobro, not 12. With this theme, the Eroica theme, what's now known as the Eroica theme, Beethoven goes through several journeys, I would say, because he used it in so many pieces. And his main legacy, actually, as a composer is motivic development, how he took something very simple and developed it into a larger scale, complex work. And that's very, very obvious in these variations, the Eroica variations, where he takes a very, very simple theme and then creates something, you know, a 20 to 22 minute work out of it, which then becomes the fourth movement of the symphony. And of course you can't mention the name Brahms without mentioning Beethoven, because I think Beethoven was a permanent ghost in Brahms's life. When he wrote this second sonata, he had spent a summer studying all sorts of composers, from Bach to Liszt. And I think this piece is a medley of all of these influences. And it's no surprise to me that that's actually what he takes to Schumann at his first meeting. He sits down and plays this piece, and made a huge impression on Schumann and his wife.